This is the story of Katy Perry's ex-boyfriend, the famous actor and killer. Johnny Lewis started his acting career when he was only 7 years old. He had bit parts in commercials. He even did a commercial for Pizza Hut. And as he got older, he starred in Malcolm in the Middle, Seventh Heaven, and Drake and Josh. My man was doing it. In 2001, when Johnny was only 18 years old, he was making enough money that he was able to move out of his parents' house in North Los Angeles and move right into Hollywood. And in 2006, at the age of 23, he was doing it big. He was doing TV shows, and matter of fact, he had recurring roles on the hit show, The OC. And guess what, folks? He was dating Katy Perry. It was a short romance, but it sure was an intense one. Katy would go on to write 2 songs about Johnny. Johnny would hit it big in 2008 when he would land a major role on the TV show Sons of Anarchy. But he didn't really like it because that show was too violent for him, and he wasn't that type of man. So he worked on it for 2 seasons, and then he went to the writers. He told them, "You guys need to cut me out. I can't do this show no more." They begged him to stay, but he wasn't having it. So in 2009, he was killed off. After leaving Sons of Anarchy, Johnny didn't want to act no more, at least for the time being. He wanted to write his first novel about this musical genius trying to find his way in the world. But he needed a peaceful place to live and just clear his head and write. So he asked around, "Does anyone know of a peaceful place I could rent?" His photographer would tell him, "Of course I do. Try the Writer's Villa. It's just outside of Hollywood." The Writer's Villa had become famous because Kathy Davis, the landlord, was such a nice person and really took care of the actors that rented there. On April of 2009, Johnny would call Miss Kathy. "Hey, Miss Kathy, do you happen to have a place I could rent out?" Miss Kathy would reply, "Sure, Johnny, you could come and stay in the 2nd floor in the Red Suite." And everything just went wonderful, peaceful, and so relaxing. It was so relaxing, it makes me fall asleep and feel so relaxed. But a few months later, Johnny's girlfriend Diane would become pregnant, and Johnny would move out of the Writer's Villa and move in with his girlfriend Diane. And 9 months later, she would give birth to a beautiful daughter named Colomay. But sadly, the romance didn't last, and Johnny would move back home with his parents. Johnny and Diane would have this vicious custody battle over Colomay that Johnny would lose. That really broke him, and a few months later he just took out his motorcycle and went off for a ride to clear his head. He would have this accident and go to the hospital. They told him everything was okay. "You seem okay." And then when he went home, everything was but okay. Johnny was basically a different human being. Immediately, Johnny's father, Michael, noticed something not right with his son. He would schedule 2 separate MRIs for his son, but Johnny wouldn't go. And on December that year, in an acting class with his friends, Johnny started talking in like a British accent. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you have any Grey Poupon?" And then his friends just told him, "Hey Johnny, why are you talking like that? Why are you talking in British for?" And he just shrugged it off like he wasn't even doing it. On the morning of January 3rd, 2012, as his mom was cooking him eggs in the kitchen, Johnny would get up and tell his mom, "Hey Mom, I'm going out for a walk." He would walk outside in his pajamas, barefoot, and he walked a couple feet, then he would hear these weird screams, "Ah!" So he thought they were coming from that apartment. So he runs to the apartment, breaks in, tries to save the person, but no one's there. So he looked around, no one's there. But then after a little bit, two people would come to that apartment. They were the people that owned that apartment. So Johnny saw them. So they saw Johnny. They told him, "Hey, you, what you doing in our apartment? You got to get out of here." So Johnny would tell them. Matter of fact, he didn't even say nothing. He grabbed the bottle and ran up to them. Boom! Ah! The guy said, "Ah, my head." Boom! The other guy. So they managed to hold him down. And the police would come arrest him and charge him with the works. Trespassing, assault with a deadly weapon, you name it. It would take Johnny's father 8 days to come bail him out. Within those 8 days, Johnny got moved from general population to a psych ward. Why do you ask? I'll tell you why. The man wasn't acting right. He was banging his head on the walls. Boom, boom, boom. As a matter of fact, he tried to jump off the balcony. So when he was being discharged, the doctor would write, "This guy may have had a head injury. He ain't right." When Johnny returned, he was just messed up. He had 2 black eyes. His face was puffy from that fight he had with those 2 men that he went crazy on. And he would stay in his room in the dark. As a matter of fact, he didn't want no light at all in the house, so he would go around turning off the lights. But his parents would turn them back on. So he went to the fuse box and moved the fuse. But eventually, after a couple of weeks, he was improving. So he told his parents, "I'm moving out." So they agreed. And Johnny would move out to Santa Monica, California, and find a place of his own. A couple days later, on February 10th, Johnny would walk into a yogurt store and go up to a random stranger and boom, punch him in the head. And the guy would go like this, "Ah, why you did that for? You don't even know me." And Johnny would be arrested, then released on a $20,000 bail. Then a couple days after that, he would walk into the ocean fully closed on. And when they pulled him out, he was shivering and had to go to the hospital because of hypothermia. Then a couple days after that, he broke into this woman's house. He claimed it was his friend's house that he was trying to get in, but the cops didn't buy that. And they arrested him, and he was released again on bail. After his 2 weird arrests in Santa Monica, his parents were able to persuade him to go see a doctor about that head injury he had suffered. And the doctor would tell him, "Nah, man, you don't have a head injury. You're suffering from schizophrenia and you're bipolar." And the doctor would write him some prescription meds and tell him, "Man, take them and be on your way. You should be all right now." And Johnny refused to take the meds, and he refused to see another doctor. And things just became worse and worse for him. Johnny was facing some serious prison time for the 2 guys he had fought with that gave him those 2 donuts on his face. A donut is a black guy. That's how we used to call a black guy back in the day. We used to joke around with our friends, "Hey, who gave you that donut?" Anyway, so his lawyer tried to get him a deal that he would go to a mental facility for a year instead of prison. So he told his lawyer, "You trying to put me in a mental hospital? I ain't crazy." And he fired his lawyer. So the judge would sentence him for a year in prison. Anyway, he was lucky. The prison was overcrowded, so they reduced his sentence only to 6 weeks. When Johnny's father went to pick up Johnny from prison on Friday, September 21st, 2012, Johnny was at an all-time low. I mean, he was just low. And he would tell his father, "Dad, I had found peace at the writer's villa. You think you could call Miss Katy and set me up again?" His father thought that was a great idea. And when they got home, Johnny's father would call Miss Katy, "Hey, Miss Katy, can my son come rent a spot there again?" And Miss Katy would say, "Of course, the red suite is still available." Johnny would spend the weekend with his parents and move back to the writer's villa on Monday. 2 days after that, a neighbor to the writer's villa named Dan Blackburn heard something outside, so he opened his curtain and looked outside, and he saw a strange man with no shirt on and just jeans and red shoes pacing the streets and acting strange. He kept on looking at him, and then after 15 minutes, that strange man went straight to his front door and knocked on it. Bang, 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 bang. Dan would go to the door and open it just a little bit, just to be able to look outside, and he would see Johnny. And Johnny would say, "Hi, I'm Johnny, your neighbor. Nice to meet you." And Dan would say, "Nice to meet you, I'm Dan." And all of a sudden, Johnny would just turn around and go back into the villa and disappear. And Dan would say, "That's strange. That's just strange." 30 minutes would pass by, and all of a sudden, Dan would hear his wife outside screaming, "Dan! Dan!" So he ran to the door, opened it, and he would look at his wife, and she would be pointing, "Look over there, look over there." And Dan would see Johnny beating up that worker that they had hired that day to paint the back deck. So he ran to Johnny, pulled him out off him, and they started fighting. But Johnny was out there. He wasn't moving. He was just like this. You know, like when they used to hit Jason in Friday the 13th and Jason wouldn't move. So he's like, "What's wrong with this guy?" He got a chair, broke it on him, and Johnny was just standing like this, not moving. So the same thing they do in Friday the 13th. They just leave Jason and run. That's what Dan did. So all three ran to the apartment. But guess what? Johnny, ran after them, and he put his arm when they were closing the door the same way Jason used to do. So they tried to close the door. They couldn't. Then finally all three managed to get his arm out there and close the door. After they closed the door, they were yelling at each other, "Close all the windows! Close all the windows!" The same thing they do in Friday the 13th when Jason's after you. And then he went to the window, pulled out his phone, and called 911 and explained the situation, and was looking outside. He would see Johnny running and then jumping over fences and going into the villa and disappearing. Within minutes, the police were at the scene. They entered the villa and just couldn't believe their eyes. After investigating, this is the story they believe took place. Okay, do you guys remember earlier that day when Johnny knocked on Dan's house and Dan was able to open the door just a little bit and he saw Johnny and Johnny said, "Hi, I'm your neighbor," and just left? The police believe he went to Kathy David's house afterwards, and Kathy saw him, and she saw him with no shirt on, looking troubled. She told him, "Are you okay, son? Come on in." He would attack her with a hammer, killing her, and killing her cat the same way. Then after that, he would see the guy painting the deck. He would attack him. And finally, when they were able to escape and go into that apartment and close the door, he would jump the fences and climb up to the roof and fall off. The question here is, was it an accidental death or suicide? The report officially has it as accidental. When this story broke, everyone assumed he was high on drugs. Then a report would come out saying he had no drugs in his system at all and was completely sober when all this took place. I need a favor from you guys. Please leave it in the comments section. Leave your opinions. What do you guys think really happened? I need to know for myself. I'm Ahmed Bassioni, and I wanted to thank you guys for watching today's video. God bless you. I owe you guys one. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm out of this joint.